Hello class. In this video I'm going to talk about how to add trees to your drawing. It's something that really is quite common, and quite honestly there's lots of different ways of adding trees. I'm only going to talk about one way. It'll give me opportunity to talk about different things you need to consider when doing trees. Now one way that you might bring in a tree is it could be in with a 3D model. We actually see I had a tree in my 3D model. That's what this is here. Now it ended up not quite working because of the scale of my drawing, and I could solve that in different ways. I mean, one thing I could do is just crop out this edge. I don't need it. There's nothing important there, and crop off the top, and that would be perfectly fine. I could also cover it up. I could do other things, so there's lots of solutions I could deal with that tree. We'll see what happens as I move forward. When you're putting in new trees, besides getting it from your rendering model, there's a couple other ways of doing it. You could go to Google and find trees, and that works to a certain degree. They will look more realistic than your rendering that came from your rendering engine. The problem with that is they often look the same. Like you find one good tree, but you want it 3 times and it looks identical. And that ends up being a little bit weird. So another great tool, which I will often use a lot, is I will put a tree right from Photoshop. Photoshop has a fun tree tool that I think is very useful for a couple reasons. So let's take a look at that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to go to the top. For now, I might move my layers around. I'm going to make a new layer and call it tree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Filter, Render, Tree. And you'll see this dialog box comes up. And the really quick review, you should spend some time playing around with this as needed, but a quick review is that's nice is I can select species. So if I know, for example, like the Catskills have lots of maple, they have lots of evergreens, I could specifically choose that. I can adjust the lighting direction. I know in my case the sun is sort of more on the left-hand side, where the background image, the sun is more on the left-hand side, but this tree, it's more on the tree is on the left-hand side, the building's on the right-hand side, so I want to switch that around and have the lighting come from the other direction to match my background image. Perfectly fine. And I can adjust these settings as needed. Maybe I'll lower the branch height a little bit. It looks a little high for some, see, it looks a little bit more naturalized if I lower the branch height. You could play with any of these things. The nice thing is, and I'll show you this as I go, is I can change the arrangement, which randomly generates a tree. I don't need to do it now because this is my first one. So right now I'm just going to say okay, and it's going to put the tree in the center of the screen, bigger than it needs to be. What we'll do is we'll just go to your move tool and we'll move it around and place a couple trees in our image. And I think the first one I'll do, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to put one behind the house. So I'm going to move the trunk to somewhere back behind the house. It's sticking out above, and that's okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the layer and put it down below the building layer so it looks behind. Now this tree is way too big right now, so I'm just going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and if you can't see the top like I can, I'm just going to zoom out, and I'm just going to go from a corner and pull it down off, downwards. Now I want to talk about tree size for a second, because a lot of times students will make their trees really small. Trees are bigger than most houses, at least full-grown trees, full-grown maple trees. So maple trees could be taller than what I'm even showing here, and that's perfectly fine. It's also perfectly fine if you want your trees to extend off the top of your drawing. We don't necessarily frame everything to be completely in there. So they can be off the top of your drawing, they can be off the right side, or whatever the case might be. In this case, I am going to maybe at least now show a little bit of the sky back there. The smaller it is, implying the deeper into the background it might be. So I'll start by putting one back there. Okay, just for demonstration purposes, you decide where you want to put it yourself. Now I'm going to make a new layer, because every time you need a new tree, you want a new layer. So I'm going to go to the top, make a new layer. I'm going to go back to this filter and go to Render, Tree. And this is where the Photoshop tool comes in nice, because what I can do is I can just randomly slide the slider anywhere. And it's going to just make a same species but a different tree. And so when I say OK, it's going to come in, and it's going to look the same but not be identical, which is the problem when you get images from Google or use them in 3D modeling software. Now, does these trees look exactly like a real tree? No, but we'll see if we can get this to look a little more real as we proceed through the assignment. Now, one thing, again, you can have trees come off the side, so I'll go off the side. If you want to cover the house a little bit too, you can, if that is what you want to do. In this case, I think I will put it behind my building so I can get it behind these seats back here, and just a little bit like that. I think I'm going to make this one so it is sort of go off the screen to the left and top, and just sort of set it off just like that. Yeah, I think that's a good spot for my tree. I do want to see the mountain though. I also want to be careful about that, so I might pull it off to the side a little bit more. Just composing the image, maybe shrink it a little bit so I can see that mountain back there a little bit, because I think that's interesting. And there's a nice tree. As I have this background tree and this tree here, starting to add depth. But I'm going to add one more tree to mine. So another layer, another tree. I'm going to show you a different way of thinking about trees with this one. Sometimes putting a tree way up front can really add depth and capture the image. We'll talk more about that when we go over the composition. But you can watch this. I'm going to go tree. I'm going to go to render tree. And I'll just randomly pick a new setting. Actually, in this case, I think I'm going to pick my branch is up higher, my branch height up higher for what I'm about to do. I want some nice branches over here, so I might just try a random different setting. Like something like that might be better. I've got a nice branch and some leaves over here. So we'll say okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this one really big and just mostly just show the trunk. So I'm going to go Control T for scale, and don't be afraid to scale this up pretty big here. I'm going to put it right on the edge, right? And say I just want to see a bit of the branch coming down, almost as if we're, and I know I'm going to crop the bottom off, but it's almost as if we're underneath this tree that I'm putting here. Okay, that's why I wasn't worried about this tree back here, because notice how when I put this tree here, it looks like that's just another tree in the image, perfectly fine. So I'll try setting it there. I can always adjust the scale and location as needed, but I think that's, looking pretty good here and giving a lot of depth to my image. In this case, because this one's so big, it could be a good spot to go to Google and find a trunk and put the trunk image in where these can be Photoshop ones. But, this will work for this assignment. Now, again, this tree is looking perfectly fine back there. But if you didn't want that tree that came over, if you happen to have one, you can just go to that layer, which is going to be your building layer, select carefully around the building, and then delete the tree away. But I'm gonna leave mine in as is. I might zoom in actually. If I zoom in, I see some of the old sky actually. So I might go to my building layer in this case, magic wand it, and just click some of these larger spaces out. You don't need to watch me doing all of this. Some of it really does just look like clouds, so you don't have to be perfect about it. Just a few more spots of that are larger in their white areas will help, just like that. And there you go. You've got trees, and put some trees in it. Be thoughtful about what you're doing. You can be a little more thoughtful about species as well, but make sure they make sense in terms of their lighting, how big they are, where they go, the species, and so on. So good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.